Empire of the Future. The Nazama Odyssey Part 1. Inception Chapter 1. Introducing Elijah Nazama, a visionary yet inexperienced entrepreneur. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, their buzz almost a lullaby compared to the frantic rhythm in Elijah Nazama's chest. 23 years old, tie askew, a hastily reheated slice of pizza his only sustenance for the last 12 hours. Stacks of yellowed business journals littered the floor of his cramped apartment-turned-office, their pages dog-eared and scrawled with barely legible notes. This was it. The make or break. Elijah wasn't built for the ordinary. Even in school, they'd chafed against the rote memorization, the linear paths their teachers expected. Those worn textbooks felt like shackles compared to the boundless expanse of the internet. He had an insatiable thirst for knowledge and an even greater desire to do something with it. To leave a mark. So, while his classmates pored over entry-level job listings, Elijah was a sponge, soaking up every blog post, podcast, and TED Talk on disruption, innovation, and building something from nothing. His parents, kind, salt-of-the-earth folk, weren't entirely sold. His father, a dependable mechanic who found solace in the predictable rhythm of engines, couldn't fathom his son's aversion to a solid trade. His mother, forever in a flurry of baking and knitting for the local church socials, would cluck her tongue and warn about Icarus flying too close to the sun. But Elijah had to fly. He'd worked a string of odd jobs. Web design, data entry, even a stint as the mascot for a failing minor league baseball team. The mascots get to see the games for free, they said. But nothing ignited that spark. Then, it came. A deceptively simple thought, striking him late one night during a particularly grueling delivery route. Why was it so difficult to find what you needed, immediately? Sure, there were niche online shops for enthusiasts. But where was the one-stop shop for the everyday person? The digital general store, stocking everything from spare drill bits to those strangely popular fidget spinners his younger cousin wouldn't shut up about? The idea of Nazama was born. Not so much a business plan, but a breathless vision. Imagine a world where convenience ruled supreme. If you could think it, Nazama would have it. With lightning-fast delivery times that would make you wonder if the future had arrived early on your doorstep. Elijah knew this wasn't just about selling products, it was about selling a revolution. His first pitch was a disaster. He'd managed to finagle a meeting with a local angel investor. Suit 2 sizes too big, PowerPoint slides riddled with typos, Elijah choked on words like scalability and supply chain even he only vaguely understood. The investor, all polished indifference, had barely concealed his amusement. Convenience? Kid, everyone wants convenience. It's hardly the next unicorn idea, he'd scoffed, dismissing Elijah before he had finished his third slide. Rejection stung, but doubt stung sharper. Was this a pipe dream? A childish delusion? Late that night, alone with the echoes of his ambition, Elijah considered packing it in. Maybe his parents were right. Maybe a steady, predictable life wasn't so bad. Then, a defiant fire flared in his belly. No, he had seen the future, tasted its electric possibilities. Failure now, 100 failures, were mere bumps on the road. The next few months were a blur. He maxed out a credit card on books about e-commerce giants, dissected their success to its molecular level. Elijah slept on a friend's couch, eating ramen noodles to squirrel away funds. He coded until his eyes burned, creating a rough prototype website that looked like it had escaped from the early 2000s. But it worked, just barely. Every rejection was a data point. He'd watch investors' eyes glaze over, note the dismissive comments they thought he couldn't hear, then go home and rework his approach. More streamlined pitch. Less jargon, more heart. He hammered away at his grand vision until it shone, sharp enough to cut through the skepticism. One rainy November afternoon, it happened. A small seed funding round, led by a woman who actually seemed to understand him. Not much, just enough for a basic warehouse, a skeletal staff, and the chance to prove Nazama could walk, not just crawl. The day the first delivery went out, a packet of batteries shipped with an almost absurd delivery time, Elijah wept. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't even remotely profitable. But it was real, tangible proof that his relentless belief hadn't been misplaced. And somewhere deep down, a voice whispered this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. The founding team. The early days of Nazama vibrated with a kind of chaotic energy Elijah had never quite felt before. His warehouse was an old furniture store off a dusty bypass, its linoleum floors still faintly smelling of polish and regret. It pulsed at all hours, filled with the rhythmic beep of barcode scanners and the sharp smell of packing tape. But Nazama wasn't just Elijah anymore. He needed a team, and finding the right people, those as crazy as him, felt equally vital and impossible. His seed funding wasn't enough for big salaries. What he offered instead was sweat equity and a stake in the impossible. First came Sarah. All sleek efficiency and wry humor, she had left a safe but soulless corporate job, drawn to Nazama's audaciousness. As a logistics and operations genius, she looked at Elijah's chaotic systems and saw not disorder, but exciting potential. It was Sarah who imposed order on the burgeoning operation, streamlining the chaotic flow of inventory and devising delivery routes with almost military precision. Initially, she'd rolled her eyes at Elijah's insistence on ridiculously short delivery times. People don't need batteries that fast, Elijah. But there was a flicker of intrigue in her gaze too, a recognition of the untapped market they could corner. Next was Raj, a coder so brilliant he almost bordered on antisocial. Rumpled t-shirts, perpetually unwashed hair, and a near-religious belief in the power of elegant algorithms. Raj had been freelancing from his parents' basement, surviving on energy drinks and old sci-fi reruns. He looked at Nazama's clunky website and snorted derisively. Within 24 hours, he'd rebuilt most of it faster, leaner, and strangely intuitive. More importantly, he saw Elijah's grand vision, not as a delusion, but a technical challenge worthy of his eccentric talent. The early team was, by necessity, mismatched. There was Priya, a former marketing whiz tired of peddling vapid lifestyle brands, who jumped ship for a pay cut and the thrill of building something from the ground up. Joe, ex-delivery driver and current warehouse manager, a man twice Elijah's age, gruff but loyal, who held the whole operation together with his common sense and seemingly endless knowledge of zip codes. They fought, laughed, pulled impossible all-nighters fueled by adrenaline and takeout pizza. There was skepticism, of course. Eyebrows raised at Elijah's ever more ambitious announcements. Quiet conversations Sarah would overhear about whether this whole thing was just some rich kid's folly. But then came the triumphs, small at first, then building upon themselves. The day they broke 1,000 orders. That local news article about the scrappy startup offering insanely fast delivery times. The customer testimonials, flowing in, filled with a surprise and delight that made all the sleepless nights worth it. The biggest win came in the form of a competitor. Not just any competitor, but Omnicorp, the reigning behemoth of e-commerce, a faceless giant with warehouses the size of small towns. They sent a cease and desist notice, accusing Nazama of patent infringement and generally throwing their considerable weight around. Elijah, initially crushed, felt a surge of defiance. If Omnicorp was taking notice, that meant they were onto something. Sarah was the one to rally the troops. "They're scared," she declared, her voice ringing with a certainty that spread to the rest of them. Scared of competition, scared of what we represent. That night, fueled by underdog rage and too much coffee, they pored over the legal documents, picking apart Omnicorp's claims. With Raj tweaking the code and Priya spinning the situation as a classic David versus Goliath story, they not only survived, but the publicity stunt catapulted Nazama into the spotlight. From then on, there was a shift. The skeptics within the team started to believe, to see with their own eyes that this flight of fancy might actually take off. More importantly, Elijah began to believe in them, not just their skills, but their collective will to build something extraordinary. They weren't just a startup, a band of hustlers. They were the foundation of the Nazama he envisioned. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and more addicting than even the strongest coffee. Elijah had assembled his crew, a group as improbable as Nazama itself. The pieces were in place. The strategist, the tech genius, the visionary heart, bound together by ambition and a shared belief in a future they were building, one chaotic, thrilling day at a time. Chapter 3. Meetings and planning. Nazama's conference room, a glorified broom closet clean to within an inch of its life, pulsed with an almost tangible tension. Whiteboard covered in a mess of arrows, half-erased diagrams, and far too many exclamation points, Elijah paced the center of the room like a caged animal. "We need our killer app," he announced, though the "we" in this case was a roomful of exhausted faces and subtly skeptical glances. "Easy to say," grumbled Raj, slumped in a corner, laptop balanced precariously on his knees. "Killer apps don't grow on trees, Elijah. But we can't just be a Me Too, slightly faster e-shop." Priya bit back, ever the voice of reason, but there was a hint of panic in her eyes. OmniCorp, fresh from their cease and desist debacle, were rumored to be working on their own rapid delivery system. Time was the enemy, and they needed their ace in the hole. Their initial success had given them breathing room, but also a ticking clock. Investor interest was piqued, but that interest wouldn't last forever. There needed to be something that differentiated Nazama, made them unforgettable. The idea sparked unexpectedly. Sarah, who usually kept a cool head even in the most heated debates, had been staring at the whiteboard, her brow creased. "Wait," she blurted, voice filled with urgency. "The data." She pointed to a corner of the whiteboard, where a chart of customer orders lived. A mass of seemingly random purchases, except it wasn't quite random. Patterns. Sarah was a whirlwind now, pacing alongside Elijah. People aren't just buying one thing. They buy clusters. And here she paused, fishing for the words. "The DIY dads," Priya chimed in, eyes widening, "batteries with screwdrivers, drill bits with safety goggles. The last-minute birthdays, cards, wrap, and those little bows they never have on hand." This was Nazama's aha moment. Convenience wasn't just about speed, it was about anticipation, about knowing what people needed before they even knew it themselves. "Product bundles," Elijah whispered, the words hanging in the stagnant air. Then, with a grin, "No. Not bundles. Kits." It was madness, glorious madness. The idea of preemptive product kits designed for those common life moments. The "My Pipes Burst" kit, complete with everything a panicked homeowner would need. The "Forgot My Friend's Baby Shower" kit for the chronically disorganized. Even a "Zombie Apocalypse starter pack." Raj snorted, then a gleam entered his eye, fingers flying across his keyboard. "We could use the past order data to generate them." The development phase that followed was a roller coaster. Days bled into nights, and the broom closet turned war room became their second home. It wasn't seamless. Elijah's grand vision collided with the reality of inventory management, pricing, and the fact that "Zombie Apocalypse" is not a recognized product category on most supplier lists. Joe, with his years of experience in the unglamorous world of logistics, saved them more than once, shaking his head and muttering about "fancy ideas," before somehow finding a way to source 50 rolls of waterproof duct tape and a dozen gas masks at a decent price. There were technical nightmares too. One morning, the entire website came crashing down, 2 hours before the launch of their impromptu dinner party kit. Raj vanished into some code-induced trance, pizza boxes piling up around his desk, before emerging a full day later, unshaven and triumphant, a hastily scrawled fix saving the day. But they also stumbled upon brilliance. Priya, late one night, had a stroke of genius fueled by caffeine and sheer desperation. "Membership," she shouted. "Subscription kits, monthly boxes for niche enthusiasts. The Baking Obsession box, the Plant Parent Survival box, a steady stream of revenue, and a way to build a devoted fanbase." The first live test was nerve-wracking. The initial batch of kits hovered on the website, meticulously packaged, the descriptions a mix of Elijah's optimism and Priya's knack for playful copywriting. They watched, with the collective bated breath of the desperate, as the order counter ticked over. 1. A tentative sign of life. Then another, and another. Not a flood, but a steady stream. Then, the news alert. A tech blogger with far too much influence had stumbled upon their "new puppy panic" kit and was gushing over its quirky brilliance. By the next morning, that trickle had become a torrent. Nazama's servers screeched in protest. Raj swore violently as traffic threatened to overwhelm their scrappy little website. It was glorious, terrifying, and the surest sign they were finally onto something special. Exhausted and triumphant, Elijah ordered celebratory pizza and made a silent promise to the empty warehouse. This was just the beginning.